there's a very good connection to Audi for Carlos, in that his dad, Carlos Sainz Sr., actually races for Audi in the Dakar Rally every year. And he actually won Dakar with Audi this year. Yeah, I mean, I think the V card just looks like a business card, to be honest with you. Visa's marketing.
It looks like a debit card.
Yeah, exactly. Visa's marketing is never that exciting, but it does the job, and I think that's the vibe they've gone for there.
Hello and welcome to On Track GP. It's myself and Richard this morning. How are you?
Good, very good.
I haven't actually seen you for ages.
No, I've been away. I've been on the other side of the world, just avoiding the bad weather.
I know.
But you've been doing the same.
I feel like we should just basically move the studio to somewhere hot.
Just in the winter.
Yeah, while we have the off-season, and then we could just pick it up again in Bahrain.
Stick it on the beach in the Maldives. There you go.
I think we should do that. I definitely think we should do that. But we are very nearly at the start of the season. I mean, it's gone so quickly.
It has.
It's flown.
It has. And to be honest, this season, normally off-seasons are pretty boring. I mean, this one's been like an EastEnders episode, you know.
It's been so much going. We've had like silly season now. It's been
exactly
a little bit wild.
And it's still going on. Obviously, we've got the Christian Horner thing still going on. Then I think there's still going to be some fallout from the Cadillac Andretti thing once we get into the season. There's still noises coming from the American side. So it's been far more entertaining than normal.
Definitely. And we also do have Drive to Survive coming out very soon, which we all love Drive to Survive. And also it's the last one we're going to see Gunter in. So
it is, which is a big shame, but maybe someone else will come into the woodwork. Who knows? The new Japanese person at Haas might turn out to be a bit of a samurai.
Yeah, it could be. But I feel like it's big boots to fill.
Yeah.
Big boots. But we are going to talk about car launches today, because all 10 teams have now concluded their launches ahead of the new season. Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, they've all got significant updates, redesigns to their car. What have you made of all the new designs?
It's, to be perfectly honest with you, you can't really tell much by looking at them, especially because the regulations aren't that different to last year. So there's not going to be any significant visual changes. And the other thing is, the teams always bring out one car for the launch, and then they bring out another car for the testing, and then they bring out another car for the first race. So it's very, very difficult to judge anything from that. But the reality is, when you don't have huge regulation changes, it's probably going to be very similar order to next year. I don't think anybody's going to have found something huge over the winter. And I expect Red Bull probably had some updates, which they didn't bring in last year, which they've now brought in over the winter.
Well, wasn't it with Red Bull that they actually stopped development about 6 months ago on the old car
to focus on the new one?
So what kind of changes do you think that we can see on the Red Bull?
To be honest, as I said, I don't think we're going to see all of them until we get to the first race, because they'll be doing their best to hide it, but they would have spent umpteen hours in the wind tunnel. And from the spy shots that we saw from the Silverstone test, it was actually quite unlucky for Red Bull, because it was a wet day. And on the rainy days, you can actually see the aerodynamic flows, and the flow of the aero looked very, it's getting a bit technical, but it looked fairly impressive. I still think Red Bull are looking favourites for the season.
We think so. Yeah. And the situation with Christian Horner, I mean, obviously we still don't really know what's going on, but there is a worry that I guess this is going to carry over into the start of the season. Do you think that's going to have an impact on Red Bull?
I don't think it will, because everything is so set in stone going into these seasons. It's a comment I made, I think it was last year, when Vasseur came into Ferrari. You were never going to see an instant change, because everything in Formula One, the car's already complete, the systems are already there, everything is being run in a certain way already. For any sort of change to come in when there's a team principal change, it would normally take 6 months at the very least for there to be an effect. And you're going to see the same thing with Haas. They're going to still be struggling at the beginning of this season until the new methods come in. But it's going to be on people's minds. There's no question about that. And I think the fact that it's so secret, that lack of clarity is not going to help things.
Yeah, I agree. Look, hopefully it does get resolved. Sooner rather than later. Because for me, obviously, as a Red Bull fan, I want to see the same amount of dominance,
of course,
that we had at in all aspects last season, other than Checo, maybe. I feel like looking into this season, maybe we've been a little bit too harsh on Checo at the back end of last, but do you think that this is really like a last hurrah, I feel like, for Checo in terms of a Red Bull? Because I think that his contract's obviously up at the end of this season.
Yeah.
So if he was to maybe be able to extend the seat, everything is riding on this season, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Because the reality is he's not done the job that's necessary. Okay, as I said, he's consistently been towards the front and everything. But when you look at how much more dominant Max has been, the question mark for Red Bull is going to be with the new regulations coming in for 2025. I think they're 25 maybe. But then there's always a shake-up when new regs come in. And, if Red Bull don't have as dominant a car as they have now, because when teams find loopholes, remember Brawn with the infamous double diffuser, then you're going to need somebody on Max's level to drag the car forwards. And if Max is only not winning every single race, but winning a couple of races, and Checo's then marred in the midfield, that's going to be a disaster for Red Bull. So I think, honestly, he has to, not saying beat Max, because we all respect Max's ability, but he has to be a very consistent P2 constantly there and right on the heels of Max through this season. Otherwise, I think his time's up.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's what we missed from him really last season. The season before that, I think we can all commend him for being a great teammate. Like he was a perfect person you'd want in that second seat. But he needs to be reliable. He needs to be fighting to make sure that P2 spot is wrapped up and there's no pressure on Max.
I think the other thing is that if you look at I hate this expression, and I'm sure all racing drivers hate this expression, but if you look at the very good number 2 drivers from the past, we're talking your Eddie Irvines, we're talking David Coulthard's, Rubens Barrichello, they kind of accepted that they were up against one of the greatest of all time, in shape of Michael Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen. And they just adapted to make sure that they were excellent at their role and say that they were happy to be behind Mika or Michael. And they never sort of tried to consistently beat him. Of course, they had their days, and good for them. But I think if Checo kind of stops trying to think about winning the World Championship and takes that pressure off of him, I know that goes against every single fibre in a driver's body, but it's just the reality of the situation. Max is one of the greatest of all time. And focuses on just being that consistent number 2, then I think he'll have a lot better year because the pressure will be off him. Yeah,
I agree. I think because maybe the start of last season, there was a lot of hype over the fact that he could be battling with Max at the front. I think maybe the confidence was massively knocked when things started to dip a little bit. But he needs to just focus on making sure that as a team that they can do the best they can. I think looking at the other teams, Mercedes and Ferrari, did you see any improvement on their car in testing?
Again, it's hard to say at the minute because everybody keeps themselves to themselves because they will. I can promise you, every single team will have had their high-res image downloaders and looking at every little secret. So honestly, until they hit the track, I think it's very difficult to say anything. But I think that Ferrari will certainly be in a confident mood going into this year with the progress they made towards the end of last season. And, it seems like Vasseur's methodology and implementation stuff, it's slowly starting to get results. And we saw that towards the end of last season. I think they will probably be buoyed, even subconsciously within the team, about the news of Lewis. I mean, Lewis does get you a lot more excited than Carlos. And so I think that, and Carlos will be out to prove something as well. So I think Ferrari are looking good. I'd say less so about Mercedes because, they've had I'd call it quite a negative winter so far, obviously with the news about Lewis. And then there's all the potential moves of staff going over. There's lots of chats about what Pete Bonnington's going to do. And then obviously there's been some criticism from Pacers about George. So it's been quite a negative off-season for Mercedes. So that I don't think they're going to have that momentum going into it that Ferrari will have.
Yeah, I think there's also the argument, though, that with Lewis going, I mean, Lewis is going to want to try and prove the point as well at Mercedes. Obviously, he'd love to probably go and win the 8th with Mercedes. Whether or not the car is at that level is another question. But I was going to ask you, actually, because I haven't seen you, about the Lewis move. Were you surprised by that move?
No, not really, to be honest.
But to move to Ferrari, where, I mean, obviously, look, Ferrari are the most iconic team on the grid, I would say. But in terms of progress, they've made a little bit, but they're not where they used to be. We're going back a long time.
No, but it didn't really surprise me because the thing, I think a big decision in it for Lewis was Frederick Vasseur. And Fred has an extremely good reputation for running very, very good teams for many, many years because he created a powerhouse team in the junior formulas called ART. And when Lewis was in Formula 3 and GP2, he worked directly with Vasseur. And and was very, very successful in those categories. And they're spec categories. So everybody has the same cars, and you just have to make the best of what you've got in terms of management, optimization, et cetera, et cetera. So Fred was able to do that. And I think that Lewis knows what Fred can bring and his abilities and talents and what he's doing at Ferrari. And also he did a very good job when he was at Alpha. And I think that's what motivated Lewis. So of course there's always the part in the side of a driver's head that they want to drive for Ferrari at some stage. But I think Vasseur being there was probably the key to the move.
In terms of Carlos Sainz, do you think that he was aware of that move coming? And because there's a lot of talk about him probably ending up at Audi for 26, but it's still quite a way off.
Yeah, I think he probably got completely kiboshed by that news. I expect it was kept very quiet.
I also don't think it was... I mean, look, I know you don't turn down the chance to have Lewis, but I actually think that Carlos was the more, what's the word, consistent driver for me at Ferrari last season. I really do.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously it's harsh. Like, I think it is harsh to get rid of Carlos Sainz.
I agree, but when Lewis comes available, you've got to make some tough decisions. And I think naturally, if you can control him, I think that Leclerc has shown more potential than Carlos has. Carlos is consistent, but does he look like he's ever going to be a world champion? At the minute, you'd probably say no. The other thing that hasn't been spoken about much to do with Carlos and Audi as well is that there's a very good connection to Audi for Carlos in that his dad, Carlos Sainz Sr., actually races for Audi in the Dakar Rally every year. And he actually won Dakar with Audi this year, becoming the oldest person to ever win the Dakar Rally.
Quite cool.
That's a tough race, unbelievably tough. So there is a direct connection there, which I think Ferrari probably knew that there's a very high possibility of Carlos going to Audi, and Audi is a project that would excite any driver.
Yeah, and he'd probably be number one driver, I guess, at Audi as well.
Yeah, I think he would. And I if I was a driver and having ticked the Ferrari box, and not seeing that they're going to have the potential to beat Red Bull anytime soon, if you're involved in it, then the Audi thing would be a very, very positive move. So I expect that Ferrari probably knew this and needed to put a contingency plan in place. The thing that surprises me a bit, though, is why they announced it 1 year early.
Yeah, it's a little bit odd to do that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like this year's a bit of a weird one because we all know all the good stuff is coming from 25.
Yes.
So it's a bit of a weird season. And also with Carlos, that means that Audi's not coming until 26. So what is he going to do within that year? Is there a way he goes to Red Bull in the second seat?
Well, that's the thing. There's an interim period there, which is going to be very interesting. And I can't believe that he would take a year out.
No. I can't see it.
I can't see it. There might be a case for him to, if Alex Albon, obviously they have an option on him at Red Bull. Maybe with Checo, if Checo goes at the end of the year, Alex will be drafted into Red Bull, and then Carlos could go to Williams. Because as a stopgap for Williams, that would be pretty good. Plus, we don't know how Logan Sargent's going to perform.
Yeah.
So Williams could be looking for a stopgap solution in that seat, and Carlos is a proven quantity. So it's all very up in the air, but I expect Ferrari wanted to announce it because they made tons of money from it when you saw the share price go up.
Yeah, absolutely. From a Mercedes aspect, though, I mean, it's not actually looking, as you mentioned, it's looking quite negative. But when you think of like the powerhouse that Mercedes have been, it seems like the crown has kind of slipped a little bit in terms of Toto as well. Like the relationship that Lewis had with Toto, I mean, it screams to me that there isn't that belief in the principle in the car anymore.
It's like every sport. I mean, it's like everything. Football being a good comparison. When you're winning, everything's easy. And as soon as you get a few bad results, everyone gets on the manager's back. I mean, look at West Ham at the minute. West Ham won the Conference League last year. Now everyone wants Moyes out. I mean,
fickle.
Exactly,
fickle
very fickle. And I think Formula One is a bit the same. But Lewis is probably thinking the clock's ticking. And as a driver, for any driver, it's a dream to drive for Ferrari. Ferrari, it doesn't matter whether it's Mercedes or Red Bull. Ferrari has a higher, I would call it a want for a driver to drive for at some point in their career, and he probably thinks it's his last chance. But I think that Toto and Mercedes have enough experience that they'll get back up to the top one day.
Okay, let's have a little talk about the liveries. I mean, for me, the Red Bull looks the same.
Yeah.
The Ferrari looks the same. The Mercedes looks the same. The Aston looks the same. The Alpine looks the same. The McLaren looks the same. The Williams, Pretty much the same.
Pretty much, yeah.
The Haas, all black, like more of the black, less of the white.
I mean, this is the thing which is becoming a bit. I think there needs to be a bit of a common sense regulation in Formula One. That all of these teams now are going for these non-painted parts of the car.
Right, that was leading me on to my next question about this carbon fibre thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's purely down to weight. None of it's down to design. And I think the Formula One teams need to go, okay, this is getting... Formula One generally needs to go, okay, this is getting a bit silly now. We're going to put the weight limit up 5 kilos just so you guys can paint the cars.
Yeah, because we love looking at the liveries of the car,
exactly.
don't we? We want it to look flashy. This is a Formula One car. This is what we want to see. Do you like this trend then of the carbon fibre thing?
I like it in small doses. And I think that it's, when you have it with only a couple of the cars, I think it's very, very unique. And I think it's quite a cool thing. But if every car has it, then it almost just looks like they're not finished.
Yes.
It's like when you're a child and you get one of those things where you have to colour in the certain sections. It looks like they haven't finished colouring in the sections,
I do get you on that. I want to ask you about steak and the V-carb. I mean, 2 ridiculous names for cars, especially the V-carb. Steak is also going to be called kick in certain countries that don't have gambling
and then
laws.
They've got the Swiss thing. I mean, I'm just going to refer to the steak as the sirloin for now.
Yeah, the sirloin steak and the V-carb.
Just easy.
But, what did you make of both of those cars liveries? We've got the bright green, luminous, neon for the steak, and for the V-carb, it's just got Visa plastered all over it, and it's kind of like a purpley, bluey metallic.
Yeah, I mean, I think the V-carb just looks like a business card, to be honest with you. Visa's marketing.
It looks like a debit card.
Yeah, exactly. Visa's marketing is never that exciting, but it does the job, and I think that's the vibe they've gone for there. Honestly, I like the steak. I think it's cool. It's something very, very different. It's, you don't really see that many radical colours in Formula One anymore. So to have something like that, I think is pretty cool.
Weird to think that was an Alfa Romeo.
Yes, yeah, it's very...
I'm looking at it thinking that looks nothing like an Alfa Romeo.
And you also think of what sort of Audis are. Audis are normally quite conservative and quite chilled out in terms of the way they look and are on the road, and you can't really imagine a neon green Audi because that's what it's going to become.
I mean, when the Audi comes in, I expect it to look... in my head, I expect it to look like a TT, which it's probably not, but like that sleek, sexy type of car.
Yeah, I mean, Audi, to be honest, if you go back and look at some of their past cars, the one thing they always get right is they make very, very good looking paint jobs.
Yeah, I can imagine. And if you've got an Audi, then you'll know. Right, let's move on to McLaren. I think we all know how much progress that they made last season. They had a rocky start, but they definitely turned it around. 2 really brilliant, competent drivers. Probably one of my favourite actual partnerships on the grid, actually.
Yeah.
In terms of competitiveness as well. What do we think in terms of their ceiling for this upcoming season?
I think they're going to have a really good year. I think they're going to have an excellent year. I think that... the progress that they made last year, to make that progress from being absolutely shocking to, genuine contenders at some races, I think they're going to be going in full of confidence, knowing that they can change it around. And of course, they're just going to keep evolving their concept, which still looks like it could be improved if we look at the end of last year. I think that Piastri is going to, without a shadow of a doubt, make a huge jump just because he knows everything now. He's done it all before. He's done that season.
And he had a brilliant rookie season.
He did incredibly well.
Didn't even look like a rookie.
Exactly. I think he's going to put Lando under quite a lot of pressure.
I can see this happening. I think, I have made no secret about it. I would love Lando to be at Red Bull. I really would.
Yeah.
And I think he's a brilliant driver. But I think that between the two of them, there's a really good battle that's going to go on.
Yeah.
And that we'll see unfold, especially this season.
I think it's going to get quite spicy at times. I think they're going to be a lot more level. You could kind of see with Oscar last year that Oscar was quite happy to be the number 2 and take his learning.
He was pushing Lando.
He was pushing, but when there were times where he had to move over and stuff like that, he never put up a fight or anything. But I think if he's more competitive this year, which I think he will just naturally through having had that experience, I think you're going to see a bit more friction there. I think he's going to evolve and be quite the test for Lando. And I don't think Lando's street cred would go down if that happened because Piastri is so highly rated. I think it will only help Piastri. I still think Lando would be rated extremely highly, even if Piastri's closer to him.
Well, there's also a conversation about where I know he's locked into a contract until I think 27 or 28, but there is a conversation about what would what would be the next step for Lando?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, though, it's Formula One. It's not quite as bad as football, but contracts are kind of they just kind of intentions of what you can do. But there'll be a transfer fee if necessary, and all the rest of it.
I think that's going to be really interesting as well with the moving parts. Mercedes.
Because I think if you look at the Perez situation. Who's and Toto Wolff also actually came out and said this. Toto Wolff said when Lewis went that the timing of it's quite bad because other people have signed new contracts, but that just means they have to pay more money.
Yeah, of course.
Drivers will always find a way to get out if they want to.
Without a doubt. I mean, I really am looking forward to next season. Actually,
yes, exactly.
What's going on before we've even got on the grid? Yeah. Aston Martin, they're going to try and take steps, of course, to I guess build on the progress they had at the start of the season. Alonso was just phenomenal for Aston, but. I don't know in terms of, obviously as a partnership, we're quite harsh on Lance Stroll. I do feel that for Aston to really be up there, they're going to need someone else in that second seat.
Yeah, 100%. But when your dad owns a team, then it's very unlikely that
he's going to have to make some tough calls. He's going to have to.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably the toughest call to make. Is but it depends on how much Fernando can carry them. But the reality is, even if you said, okay, Lance, you've got to step your game up, what evidence has there been since Lance has been in Formula One that he's able to step his game up?
No, I agree. There's always that one random race where he'll have a decent, maybe finish P5 or P6, like one race a season. Yeah. But apart from that, I think that I just can't see Aston really progressing to where I think Alonso would love them to be.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, they've come a long way. But I think that if they really want to try and break into that top, that's kind of like top three. For me, they've got great opportunity here with, Mercedes probably not being completely at the races. Yeah. We haven't seen them drive yet, but from what we're going off of, I think that there is definitely a mark there, which I think McLaren can capitalise on. But from an Aston point of view, I'm not entirely sure I can see them getting podiums.
No, I agree.
The odd one.
I mean, unless they really understand what happened with their concept, because obviously they were so strong at the beginning and then just
totally dropped off.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's then a case of whether they brought an all new concept or whether they've just made updates and whether the updates were effective enough. But honestly, on paper, I can't see them returning to the form they were in at the beginning of the season. I think they're probably going to have improved a little bit, but I don't think they're going to have improved that much. And then again, as you say, if Stroll's not at the races, so to speak,
nice pun.
It's going to be tough for Fernando, no question.
Williams, again, I feel like they had an actual decent season for them.
Alex Albon had a decent season.
Alex Albon had a decent season, not so much Logan Sargent, but Alex Albon has become a really good driver. I think being at Red Bull so early on, I mean, it's a lot to carry.
And I think Alex will be the first person to admit that as well.
Yeah, but he's definitely redeemed himself. We know he's a really great driver. Yeah. What's the ceiling really for Williams this year? What can they achieve?
I think a lot will depend on what Logan Sargent does. I mean, I was personally quite shocked that he got another opportunity.
I think it's the American aspect.
It has to be. I can't see any other reason. And I don't see how the gap was so big. It wasn't like a little bit. It was massive. And I know that he's come out and he's changed his training and everything like that, but I can't see him closing that gap to Alex. And so I think Logan's going to be under serious pressure, and I think that's going to put Williams under a lot of pressure as well, because they're probably going to be in a midfield battle again to be at the top of the midfield. And if you have only Alex scoring points, it's going to make life very, very difficult for them. Yeah,
I agree with you. Which car did you like the most? Which livery?
I like the Stake.
You like the Stake?
I like the Stake. I think it's so cool to have something that different. I think it's just like when McLaren first came out with the orange. Yeah. We've all got used to it now, but to have something really different, I think is really cool. As you say, Red Bull, Ferrari,
they all look the same.
They all look the same every year, but that Stake is going to be really unique.
Do you think on the Stake or the V-Carb there's any expectation for the season, or are we're just basically hanging around till...
Every time I think of that, I keep thinking of dieting,
Yeah, I know, the steak and the carb.
Exactly.
Maybe they're trying to tell us something.
I don't know. I mean, a livery change and a name change is not going to change anything. I still think they're going to be in a very similar position to how they were last year. Yeah, I think I can't see them making huge progress.
Do you know what? One team we haven't spoken about really is Alpine.
Yeah, it's because they were so boring last year.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of investment. We've said it quite a lot of times on the pod, but there's been a lot of investment going to Alpine.
Yeah.
From the NFL players and footballers, etc. And I feel like they've got the whole French driver lineup. I just don't find this whole lineup particular. They're good drivers, but I don't think they wow you. And I just think for 25, I think there's going to be a big
I think
change
you hit the nail on the head. There's just no wow factor there. It's just they're just bland. And last year as well, they were just bland. There's nothing exciting about Alpine. There's nothing that gets you.
They used to be exciting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When they were Renault.
Yeah, they were excellent.
Loved them.
Yeah, and that livery. Talking about good liveries,
that
it was
great,
gorgeous.
I love the Renault.
But it just. No, there's nothing exciting, and I think they'll just not be exciting again, to be honest.
Well, they're going to need to with all that investment. I mean, I've just got this feeling that either that Checo could end up there. I've said it a couple of times.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout.
Obviously, the money that he brings in, and in terms of the investors that they've got, I've got this feeling they're going to turn it into their own kind of like Wrexham documentary about Alpine. And I think they're going to need someone like an Alonso or like a Perez to bring that in and really get people talking about Alpine.
I think that's actually a really good shout. But if you go back and look at Gasly and Ocon, there's nothing apart from Gasly's win at Monza. There's nothing they've ever really done which makes you go, wow.
No.
The other thing to note, though, which is quite interesting, is Perez and Ocon were obviously teammates and they hated each other.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I felt kind of that it would be Gasly that kept the seat.
Yeah.
Over Ocon.
Well, I think the other thing to potentially look at as well is, if Lewis does go, Ocon could be one of the potential replacements at Mercedes, because Toto obviously manages him, and he does have a habit of bringing in drivers that he's looked after into the Mercedes fold.
Maybe we're seeing the whole spider diagram right before us.
And there you go, exactly. And you never know, George Russell under pressure, potentially.
We're seeing the moving parts. We're seeing it all. I can see that, actually.
Yeah. But Ocon at Mercedes, that would just, for me, that would be quite underwhelming. It would be like, okay, it would almost be, you've gone from Lewis Hamilton to Esteban Ocon.
But I mean, how do you replace a 7-time world champion?
Of course. But
unless it's with Max.
Yeah, but it's
Orlando.
But then you've got, or Albon or someone like that, you've got, but Ocon just wouldn't make you go, oh, okay, they're going to be a threat to be reckoned with.
I agree. I do agree with you on that. Let's just quickly talk about pre-season testing. How important is pre-season testing?
For the teams, it's absolutely vital. For the drivers, it is as well, because it shakes off the cobwebs. But they understand the systems. To be honest, there's very unlikely to be any huge reliability issues this year, because the cars are very similar to how they have been for the previous years, and teams know how they work and everything. It's more just to clarify everything. But 3 days it's racing teams and drivers will always say that they want more testing. Even if we have 100 days, we'll say we want more, but 3 days definitely isn't enough.
I was going to say that's not really enough.
Definitely not enough
when you're getting into the nitty gritty of understanding the car and the changes. I mean, I know they've been part of the process, but putting it on track is a completely different thing.
It's nowhere. Honestly, it's nowhere near enough. I mean, as I said, even if you give them 10 days, they'll want 100 days. But sort of 7 days would be a lot better, because a lot of the stuff you do in pre-season testing with the new car, honestly, the first day is a bit of a write-off, because you have so many systems to check, and you have to go through procedures, make sure all the switches work how they're supposed to. So you're not actually testing then, you're just confirming that you've effectively built the car in the right way. But then of course the drivers then haven't driven for a couple of months, so they need to get up to speed. Okay, they've been on simulators, but nothing on a simulator will prepare you for 5G. So the drivers have to get the brains into gear. So honestly, 3 days is nowhere near enough, especially when you have to switch drivers between one car.
Well, that was leading me on to my next question, because Fernando Alonso commented on that and said, why can't we use both cars in testing? Why won't they allow that?
Well, to be honest, I think that'll be 22 drivers saying that, and all the teams will be saying, no way, we don't want 2 cars, because Formula One teams will be building the cars right until the last minute with all the updates on their concept. So the teams will never push for that, and that's probably why it isn't in place. But I completely agree with him from a driver's perspective. I don't see why you can't have 2 cars. They say it's for cost, but honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it's absolutely nothing. You've got 24 races a year now. The cost side of testing for a couple more days or having an extra car should not even be thought about.
Yeah, 100%. And looking at the testing, what are the main things that we should be focusing on that we can see from the cars, from the drivers?
Honestly, you know, when you go to a test, 95% of the time, you know within 3 laps whether you're going to have a competitive year or a competitive race or something like that. Yeah, because it's you can tell immediately. And we had it last year. Everybody said after half a day that Red Bull's going to be streaks ahead. And we knew with Brawn GP, when Jenson Button had that year, they didn't use the car at all during winter testing. They did one 5-lap run and they were fastest, and they knew they were okay. So there's not really that much you can fix. Okay, you can fine tune your car, but until mid-season, the way it's going to look in testing is probably how it's going to be. But it is incredibly important. There's no question about that, and you have to optimize it.
I'm excited. And when we've had the testing, then I'm going to say to you, what do you think the lineup's going to be then for the season?
I think you could probably call me after 1 hour of the first session of the first day, and I could probably speak to someone in the paddock, and I'll be able to tell you.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
100%.
well, we're going to have to hold you to that. But before we do that, I just want to know your predictions without saying anything. Top 3 for the season.
Well, Max is obviously a given. It's tricky. I'm going to go Max. I think that Leclerc will be second, and I think that Norris will be third.
Is that including the constructors as well?
Constructors, yeah, I think, Red Bull.
Same way?
Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren, I think. Okay. I think Mercedes really aren't going to be at the races.
I totally agree. I don't have much faith going into.
Watch them prove us completely wrong. And
probably they'll probably be unbelievable. And Lewis goes and wins an 8th for Mercedes. Yeah. But we should actually start doing our predictions. We're going to make a note of them so we can see where we're all at. Thank you so much for today, Richard.
Pleasure.
Well, of course, we will be back very, very soon because it all kicks off basically.
Thank God. I hate the winter months when we've got nothing going on.
I do really. I know we said it at the start, but I do feel like this has actually gone way quicker than last year.
Yeah, because there's been so much going on. Honestly, who needs EastEnders when you have Formula One?
Honestly, we've had talking points the whole way through the off season. But don't forget, please do like and subscribe as well to On Track GP. We really appreciate it, and make sure you join us every week for all of our podcasts as well. So we will see you very soon. Take care.